I suppose no one else's character here is a sociopath. Certainly not yours.
Yeah, Jeffrey, you said that. It's not good to have too many of them
If we're
in the same
ranking,
room.
it's like
Just one will do.
yeah, most. This is actually probably most
One is
to
useful,
least.
two is complicated.
So your character Martian has just returned from 6 years in the cold. I believe that's the term that we use. What was the, I guess, character brief would be the term, because I believe you were the first person of this crew to sign on, and first person in general, right?
That's what they told me, but they could have been lying, as everyone's lying, it seems. It's a good question, because actually nobody really said this is what this guy's about. I guess I sat down with Joe early on, and we talked about, what it sort of all meant. But I was sort of, as I was sort of looking at this guy, it was one of the consultants, actually, that I got in touch with. There was one guy that was our CIA sort of specialist that I talked to, but I was like always asking questions. I was like, what is, why do people get into this? Who would want this job? And looking for kind of the dirt. And I found that gentleman was really nice, but very much like towing the company line. And then I talked to another guy who really helped me out. And, the question for me was, is this guy a sociopath or not? And, having the conversation with this gentleman who sort of, again, comes from this world, he was like, yeah, let's go through the boxes, tick the different boxes. And after a while, I was like, yep, he ticks that one too, that one is a... And then it really helped a lot. Because I was like, okay, this is the guy I'm dealing with, Now, it's not to say that he's not trying in some ways to find sort of, his soul or humanity. And I think, that's, the Samia character is, there's a, that's his savior, his humanity is in that relationship with her. But he actually even says, I think it's love, it's I certainly haven't felt it for anyone else before. So knowing that this was the kind of character he was, but in search of that, then it made a lot of decisions easier for me.
That makes sense.
And clearer.
I suppose no one else's character here is a sociopath. Certainly not yours.
Yeah, Jeffrey, you said that. It's not good to have too many of them
If we're
in the same
ranking,
room.
it's like
Just one will do.
yeah, most. This is actually probably most
One is
to
useful,
least.
two is complicated.
Richard, we'll go to you next. These characters, there's a lot of like interiority going on with these folks, and when you work for the CIA, obviously there's a lot of moral. I don't want to say moral ambiguity, because that's assuming what you might say, but there's a question around like, what is everyone doing and why, and you're making these decisions. And I assume that you guys had to kind of figure out who these people were in order to maybe say yes to the role or to play them. But kind of what was it that you came to like learn and decide for yourself of who Bosco was?
Well, I think I kind of intuitively felt the guy, but I wanted to... I picked up a lot of books about the CIA, the history of it, where it came from. And being the boss, the daddy in this one, I wanted to feel that sense of history that he would be feeling. And what the original impulse was of the first guys, they were Ivy League guys who basically wanted to be Lawrence of Arabia. And so it was very romantic for them. And I think it's still in Bosco a sense of romance about this. And I think he was out there himself. And Joe and I were talking, the director, first talk we had, I said, this only works for me if it feels like this guy has a vast experience at this stuff and has blood on his own hands one way or another, that he feels it. It's visceral to him. And I didn't want to play a guy who was just an organizational guy or was a political appointee, but it had to be someone who had been in the trenches and would deeply understand what these guys were going through, all of them, but especially him, and understand the challenges to his heart and his mind, having this kind of a job. And I could see the crisis he was in.
What the fuck is wrong with you, Henry?
Listen.
Yeah. Asking your brother-in-law about a classified op. I couldn't name a code name you weren't even supposed to know. You didn't think that was going to come back?
On the contrary, I hoped it would.
Why?
I wanted to know if he's exposed.
He's in a blackout, in a war zone.
Nothing operational was shared. I knew nothing about Felix. All I had was a name.
You want to know something? I believe you. You want to know why? Because I, Henry, am station chief, and even I don't know what Felix is, which means that Felix, dear boy, is the very, very heaviest of heavy shit, and nobody, not you, not I, no one, would ever mention. Ever.
Jeffrey, your character, deputy station chief, he's not been in the field, right?
Oh, yeah, he has.
He has been.
Yeah.
Okay. He seems to me from watching the show, like he maybe has the most emotional journey, and maybe it's because of, his emotional insofar as like his decision making around, he feels more conflicted to me about some of the decisions. And maybe it's just the way that you're able to act with your eyes or what have you. But what did you come to learn about Henry, and like what was his approach to the job?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I think we're all conflicted. All of the characters are conflicted. Henry does have a tension, that's pulling him between his work and his home life. That's true. But at the same time, I think that he seems like very much, it kind of riffing off what Richard said a bit, he's very much a company man. He's a guy who I think, treasures his own professionalism. And that was kind of important for me to focus on. I wanted to make sure that this guy was, competent, that he's there, not because somebody did him a favor. He's there because he's good at what he does. He takes it seriously. He's not a politician. He's a serious person relative to the government and governance. It's not a game for him, but it's a calling. And, granted, there's self-interest there. It's a steady job. It's all that. There's the adventure. But at the same time, I think there's a through line of a sense of duty and a sense of responsibility and an appreciation for kind of the larger or the largeness that is the responsibility of being in that position. So I looked at it in some ways as a kind of, and particularly within the context of what's going on right now. And I think there are moral ambiguities and ethical ambiguities associated with this. And I think the CIA does at times go about solving problems that it's caused. I think that's a larger kind of story about, American foreign policy. But I think he's a guy, for me, through which I wanted to celebrate the civil servant, the federal employee, who manages this institution that, we call the United States government and provides stability and security for us and a lot of things that we sometimes take for granted.
Yeah, I scribbled down a line, actually, I think it might be Richard's, that I thought was really interesting. You guys are the only branch of government that thinks in terms of decades. And I found that to be like a kind of comforting thing, that like someone is playing the long game out there and someone's thinking of things, not to say that it to disregard the problems that are happening in the short term, but I think that just.
Well, I mean, I think that luxury exists only for the bureaucrats in government, because politicians, politics, political cycles are so quick. 2 years, 4 years, 6 years. So you can't think long term, or they can, but they don't. They think in terms of self-sustenance. Whereas, the government has the ability to at least kind of compete, for example, with the Chinese or with, other, governmental systems that can afford to look decades ahead. Yeah, certainly within, this agency, it would probably be within their, it would probably be the healthy thing, within their own self-interest. Yeah, not to be flitting around from one thing to another. But they do that too. But yeah, they do have that luxury, though, I think.
Well, these are the guys who would be fired now.
Right.
Season 2.
No, it's the guys who have institutional
empty office.
memories.
Season 2, it'll be the three of us on a beach somewhere in Mexico.
Jodie, so I want to know what you knew about your character when you signed on, and maybe you watched the French version to kind of get an idea of how the character and her storyline is like unfurled and revealed, right? Because it becomes a lot more complex as you go through the season. So kind of what did you know from the beginning, and if you said yes to just like kind of that very beginning part and then got a delicious surprise to everything else that comes next?
I mean, yes, I said yes to the delicious beginning and was like absolutely, it was just kind of ticked all the boxes. And then I got into the French show because I'm endlessly curious and I wanted to know, I wanted to understand the world of the original and not in a way to sort of attach myself to it, but just to kind of get an idea of what it was that was inspiring this. And I was so blown away by the original. So it was kind of pleasant to go through it. And I love that because it's been so interesting to see, the ways in which we deviate or what we follow from the first one and the ways in which it becomes sort of powerfully altered to cater to primarily American audience, versus the French original. So, I think that Jez and John Henry are such incredible writers that even though they are sticking in many ways to the source material, it's still so much uniquely its own thing. So it's been interesting to just be on that journey. I'm still being surprised by the story and the ways in which it's different, but at the same time, sort of having a kind of an idea of like where things are generally going. And then again, to have an actor like Michael Fassbender take on this role, I mean, honestly, one of the greatest pleasures for me of this whole thing has been taking it in after, because there's so much happening that I'm not actually even a part of, but I get to be a part of just by the way in which Michael is carrying me into Martian Story, the way in which we're seeing this tangled web that he's weaving tighten around him, and so I get to just like be present even when I'm not present, which is so fun. But yeah, so
you filmed in Cairo, I want to say, for some of your. So yeah, you guys got some of the more interesting on-location scenes. But what was the best part about kind of getting off campus, if you will, from the London set?
I mean, I still find it to be so fun to get to go to an interesting location and not only film in a new city where you're going to experience many different things as just primarily even just a different culture, but also seeing how crews operate in different cities and like getting something done. But, the madness and the beauty of a city like Cairo, I mean, that was really fun to run around Cairo and to do that. That was exciting.
Obviously, everyone here is past any sort of like audition or chemistry test read, but did the two
I
of
still audition. I just want you guys.
Well,
to know
there's
I
people.
still
We're gonna.
These guys might not, but we got some like really heavy hitters. I'm new to this.
Get her email afterwards.
To be clear,
bump you up to offer only. When was the first time you guys met? And was there any sort of like thing that either of you were looking for in the other person to kind of know you'd be able to achieve what you needed to on screen? Or you like got it right away?
No, there was a talk about us doing a chemistry read. Joe was like, I'm really, into Jodie Turner-Smith. And I was like, great choice. And then it was like, I was like, we don't need to, do a chemistry read. So never really came up again. And then we just, I think the first time, well, we had a read through, which was quite cool, actually. We did a read through for the first 2 episodes. And that was kind of nice to do that. I hadn't done that in a while. And so we'd met. But then, we just sort of started filming, and luckily, we got along, as it did all of us, actually, which, in hindsight, thank God, because it's such an intense experience, filming a show, 10 hours to do. But all of us, we were saying earlier, actually Richard was saying, we all kind of work the same way. Everybody just arrives having done their homework and brings it to the table. We don't discuss
It's
about...
not always like that.
Name some names.
We kind of, sometimes you adjust to how other people work, but that didn't happen here. I mean, really, just we all kind of vibrate the same way, and our approach to acting is very similar. So they just kind of flowed together.
I know a lot of what you've talked about, because people love to ask you, from what I've seen of press of this show, is like, what was it like doing TV, first time in a long time, blah, blah, blah. Big movie star doing TV, and a lot of this show is a production like a film, right? It's like film screenwriters, film director.
Yeah, it was completely like a film.
So my question is there anything about
Actually,
this?
it's bigger than the last films I've been making.
Okay, so yeah,
I've
what
been
felt
making very
most different
small,
about this?
independent films, which I love doing. But I hadn't seen, we were talking about it today, I hadn't seen, I don't think I've ever been in a soundstage that big. After all these years of me making studio films, never have I seen a set this big. I mean, he has, because he's done all the Bonds and all of that stuff, but
Somebody's got to do it.
What do you want?
We need a word.
I've got the U.S. and Belarus ambassadors, and they're trying to avert a major diplomatic incident.
We have an idea.
There's a bit of them. We lost an agent. Can we please get him back?
Why are they here now? Because some bumfuck no-name congressman throws a little shade on Capitol Hill? Maybe they want to start a negotiation here. If they do have Coyote, they'll allude to it. They'll give us a sign, open a back channel. It'll be masked, subtext. We need to be in there to spot the sign.
Owen, sure. Walk away.
Sure.
Observers.
Observers.
Not a fucking word.
No word.
I mean it.
The entire office is soundstage, or what?
that was all built.
That's all LED screens.
Sarah
No, but-
Greenwood.
This was, everything you saw out the windows, all that London was all on screens.
Wow.
My
Okay.
apartment as well.
Yeah.
So it was all...
You're not really at the Barbican.
We did shoot, obviously, the outside, when
Okay,
you have
yes.
that long, wide shot and it zooms in or out, I can't remember. That was obviously, we shot all of that at the Barbican, but then, the whole apartment's recreated, and, whenever you see nighttime outside, that's all LED screens.
Yeah, it's so beautiful.
Yeah.
A lot of our Samia and Martian's rendezvous, we did that on locations. And a lot of, I really think, with the exception of our first scene, our breakup, mostly all of our stuff was on location
public.
in public.
And we didn't
We did
nothing,
get to fight on that bridge.
Nothing was ever locked off. We always had just live
Yeah.
people on the street.
Sometimes
People
tricky.
that were seeing
Sometimes
really
really
well.
takes because someone's just staring down the camera.
Exactly.
and,
I was looking for people. We got away with it because we shot a lot in live London. It wasn't locked off.
Did people start to kind of get hip to the fact that you were doing that in London and kind of looking for you around town, the sort of Sex in the City
Nobody
effect
cares.
from that? Well, now
they look.
now that everyone knows what the show is, and for season 2, when you guys go back in, I feel like if people will.
I think it's funny. Like if you have to sort of repeat something or you're going down, but I mean. You just, we did have, great sort of runners and people that were trying their best to sort of work around a crowd. But, we're in Battersea Power Station, which is like shopping center, and, you're just sort of working with the crowd. I was like worried about it, but it was never there on screen either, where people are like looking down the lens. We got lucky, and we'll see what happens next.
Belarus is a situation we're across. So far, nothing special. It's early days, but for now, we're seeing this very much as a local problem.
Jim, we both know there's no such thing as a local problem in Belarus.
Yeah, there's an unfolding situation in Minsk. Once we have a degree of clarity, we'll fold you in.
You know about new domino theory?
Yes, sir. Yes. Domino theory.
No, I didn't ask about domino theory, I asked about new domino theory. New domino theory is that the United States exists 3 dominoes away from full nuclear exchange. As we speak, there are 7,000 nuclear weapons pointed at American targets. Minsk is a big fucking domino.
Yes, sir.
The cast of this show is so stacked that even like Dominic West has, that's the level of people who are doing like smaller roles on this show. Were you looking at blank screens whenever you're like in the situation room, or did they get that really up there too? That's all real.
They're definitely there.
Wow. Okay. Incredible. Because sometimes you see like the early cuts of things and it's just everything's green and you just have to pretend. But okay, you're doing it for real. Okay.
No, and in fact, he was in another room. He was being filmed live the same time we were.
Wow.
I mean, how many cameras? Usually 2, maybe 3 cameras sometimes that we were using. So, I mean, all of that was live. There's no green screen there. Yeah, I don't.
And as well, the cinematographers were using a lot of reflection. Wanted to use it. In fact, we're shooting certain angles in the crisis room, shooting into the screen, back at us. So shooting through the screen, so the reflection was on us, but we were.
That was the trickiest stuff, actually. Was that stuff down there? It was
great.
It looks fabulous, but it wasn't easy. That can be very frustrating, getting the timing right between the reflections and what's going on screen and the moving cameras and getting that stuff. Well, we shot the footage way before that's actually on the screen, but syncing everything up some days was pretty frustrating.
I don't recall any green screen.
I think for the directors, it was a hard room to shoot in.
Yeah.
It was sort of like, we're back in the crisis room. There's only so many angles, and how do you cover that room and not have it become,
Did
repetitious? So
we use any green screen at all?
No.
Anything? No, everything was photographed. Yeah.
Incredible. Jodie, I wanted to ask you about building the accent. Because that, just talk about kind of the training that went into that and how you developed her like very specific accent. She's, a woman of many, like she's very worldly, what went into that?
Yeah, so, in addition to our show, we had a Sudanese consultant, just in terms of making sure that we were hitting certain notes or understanding certain things culturally. But I had an amazing dialect coach in Khaled Abu Nama, who is a Rhodes Scholar. He's so intelligent and amazing and incredible. And I'm really smart too. So what's great is, I've found that I feel like, language, well, first of all, accent work is hard. It is. Because half of it is just confidence, really. And then there's the other bit, because when you have a dialect as beautiful and incredible and hard as Arabic in that, because it contains sounds that we don't use in English, parts of your mouth and your throat and your vocal cords that you don't utilize. So it's like learning something new. But I do feel that it's something that perhaps it's a bit I'm closer to than maybe some other people are, and I feel confident that I can do it. So, and I love to throw myself into things, and I threw myself into it. And even now we're doing Arabic lessons as well, because I think, and I'm grateful that I get another season, because that means I can even have a chance to do a better job and to go deeper into it. And with anything, I find that I'm often asked to do some kind of an accent, and always, or I have the privilege of playing a different culture or another, community in the diaspora, and I find that is something that I take with such, I have a lot of seriousness with that, because I think it's important to honor whatever culture I've been allowed to play. I want to honor it as best as I can. I'm not always going to get it right, because it's not my mother tongue. I'm an actor. I'm not a Rhodes Scholar like my dialect coach.
You pointed over here.
But
just go with it, Rhodes Scholar, Jeffrey. But
I could have been a contender, but not quite. Not quite.
It's my job to pretend, and the biggest, I think, part of the pretending is the belief, the the sheer and utter belief, like you have to profoundly just wear something else. And when you do, even if, I mean, I think we've all watched something where the accent perhaps wasn't that great. Maybe we even had to, focus a bit so it wouldn't take us out of it. But eventually we got lost because of how committed the actor was. And to me, I think that's the most important thing, because ultimately, you're never going to get everything right because it's not your mother tongue. And there's just certain, I've been talking a lot today about nuance. And that's what I think, when you have a different accent and a different culture, this is about nuance that you're bringing to something. And you're never going to get everything right when it's not native. And I know there's an expectation for, especially with film and television, that's different than stage, where you're transported and the viewer wants to feel like it's real. So there's an expectation for this reality. But, the reality is I'm an actor. And so, but I'm still gonna fucking give it my all. You know what I mean? And do my best and always try to improve and in take by take. And I like to have a dialect coach on set because I like somebody to come in, and because that's the Virgo part of my brain. I'm like, it needs to be perfect. But was it perfect? And I'm always there like, well, the director liked the take, but did my dialect coach think that sounded good? And if it's not good, then we try to go in ADR. I love ADR. I used to hate ADR when I first started because it was so hard. And then I realized it's so powerful. You can do so much in ADR. I mean, you have the power to even change performance based on inflection of your voice. And so, we go in when there's ADR. I'm always like very in with I go in with my dialect coach and I'm like, listen, let's lock arms so that we can make sure that this is absolutely the best. Because for me, it's about someone from that culture or close to that culture watching and feeling like they've been honored. Because I'm Jamaican, and let me tell you how many times I've heard Jamaican accents that I've just been like, my God. But I've also always been just so excited when I see Jamaican culture represented, because you just have this excitement and pride, and that someone might not get it 100% right, but when you see someone like giving it their all, you're just like, yes, big up. So that's all I want, is for people to see it and see like that I've done the homework, I've done the work, and it's not gonna be perfect, and I know that, but there's always gonna be room to improve, and I get to do another season and maybe do a better job and take it to the next level,
Yeah, absolutely.
That was so long. I feel like I've been talking for a long time. I'm gonna stop now.
Now do it in Arabic.
Shukran. Okay.
Yes. Do you fall into an American accent easily?
It's like Jodie was saying. It's just a lot of hours. I was shooting Black Bag, and there I've got to do British, and so it was a lot of hours working on that. Then knowing that there was only a week between finishing that and getting on this, so I had to prep both of them in tandem. So it's I don't find it easy. I just find it's a matter of putting in the hours, and then it's about whatever that is, 4 hours a day, 5 hours a day for however many weeks it takes, however many weeks you've got. It's just recordings, listening to something back, repeating something, listening to it again, repeating. But it's not easy. I don't think it's easy if you're.
So you shot Black Bag before the agency went into production.
Yeah.
That is incredible work by the editor, everyone on the agency because that came out.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
that's when you really see how a machine can work.
Yeah.
Because I was like, okay, so when is it coming out? And they were like, November. And I was like, oh, November 25. And they were like, no, November 24. And I was like, what? I was like, is that a good idea? And, so literally we still shot a scene in episode 1, end of October. Yeah. And we went to the screening 15th of November. And then the show came out 28th of November.
We wrapped the afternoon of 15th.
We wrapped on the 15th, went to the screening.
Went to the screening. It was like opening night on Broadway.
And, it was, I have to say, that was partly my fault because they, waited for me to finish Black Bag. This year we're going to have, we'll be starting earlier. But it was impressive to see, there's great people behind this, David Glasser at 101, and you've got, Paramount with their commitment behind it. Then, you've got Smokehouse, George and Grant. And, that everybody was kind of, again, on the same wavelength, the same notes were coming in, but, it was like that constant thing of working at an episode, cutting it down, working on it, getting it ready. But it was impressive to see that, because I didn't think it could be done. But I think David's kind of, done it a few times.
Incredible. Before we are out of time, you guys are going to go into production for season 2 quite soon, right? Has everyone...
This month.
Okay. Oh, fabulous. Has everyone read the scripts? What is that? Is there anything you can tease, or is there a word that maybe describes, like a word or a sentence that kind of describes your reaction to what you read? Trying to think of ways to talk around.
I think it's better.
That's always good. You want to keep improving.
I think when I'm like kind of joking, it's sort of, this the first season. What I love about it, that people's sort of reaction to it and talking to, people, is that it's a bit of a slow burn, and we knew that. You're establishing these characters. As an audience, you got to lean into it a little bit, and then things start to sort of reveal themselves about what's going on. Then the sort of pressure comes. Then, the jeopardy of the situation gets ramped up. And, it starts in the first episode in season 2, and it picks up where we left off in episode 10 of this first season, and it doesn't let up. So it's full on. The walls are closing in. 3 months are going to have passed from when we left the
4.
Martian in the office. Yeah, we've been talking about it's either 3 or 4. At the moment, it stands at 4, but
Okay.
we might not.
My
go
one
to
word
3.
for season 2 is explosive. Would you agree, Michael Fassbender?
If you say so, I agree. Yeah, no, I think it's
Explosive.
it's intense.
That's a good one.
Trust me on that. Explosive.
Any
Pin that word.
last chance for anyone else to offer up their thoughts on season 2, but you don't have to. We've gotten plenty.
Well, my one word. Do I have a one word? What?
Season 2.
I've only read the first 3. I've been distracted by the world burning down around me. So
What could possibly be distracting you?
I've got
read the scene of the day.
I've got like 7
You guys
more
are
to read.
fleeing right on the right time.
Yeah, but as you said, I mean, it's not. The wonderful thing about the show is that it is set against the backdrop of the world as it's happening. But in this instance, the world is changing so rapidly that it'd be difficult to write the season in the present moment. So again, to Michael's point, it's not. It's 3 months after the end of this. Because again, if it were in the present moment, we'd all be on the unemployment line.
The warm, comforting hug of June 2023,
Yeah.
I suppose.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all for joining us and for answering our questions about the show.
Thank you.
Cast of The Agency, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.